This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Dr. Anthony Fauci testifying this morning as part of the House investigation into COVID origins and the pandemic response. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the story.
Fiery hearing on Capitol Hill. Dr. Anthony Fauci, former head of the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Disease, testified before Congress for 4 hours before the House Select Subcommittee on Coronavirus Pandemic. Democrats earlier today held a press conference where they denounced character assassination attacks against Dr. Fauci. Let's listen to what Democratic ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, had to say about this.
And he is not a comic book supervillain. It's summer in Washington this week, and we like to say on Capitol Hill, it's not the heat, it's the stupidity. And what's happening with the Republicans on this committee is a case in point.
The Democratic ranking member of the House Select Subcommittee on Coronavirus Pandemic, Congressman Raul Ruiz, argued that Republicans have been peddling conspiracy theories about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Our majority colleagues have spent time and taxpayer dollars fishing for evidence to back up their most extreme members' claims about Dr. Fauci. That Dr. Fauci somehow funded research that started the COVID-19 pandemic.
House Republicans, on the other hand, grilled Dr. Anthony Fauci on federal funds that ended up financing research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China, where gain-of-function research was supposedly happening.
In that he says, nothing that we were doing could have possibly caused the virus. Then admits that they didn't know what else Wuhan Institute of Virology was doing. I mean, he did admit there was a possibility of a lab leak, but wasn't willing to recognize that perhaps, inadvertently, they contributed to it.
House Republicans also grilled Dr. Anthony Fauci on social distancing mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic and on evidence that his staff had been using private emails in order to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests in order to favor an NGO called EcoHealth Alliance, which was the one who subgranted federal funds to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they were conducting research on coronaviruses.
They're responsible for the lockdowns, forced vaccinations, kids being forced to stay home, people committing suicide, and all the horrors that this country lived through during COVID. Fauci belongs in prison.
The House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic has had over 20 hearings since it was installed 15 months ago. According to ranking members, investigations will continue. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A jury is sworn in for Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. Opening statements are expected tomorrow. The jury consists of 7 men and 5 women. NTD's Jack Bradley has more from the federal courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware.
The president's son is facing 3 charges for allegedly lying on a federal form to purchase a revolver and ammunition, possessing the gun, all while addicted to crack cocaine back in 2018. Prosecutors will use excerpts from his memoir and text messages around the time of the gun purchase, which suggests he was using crack cocaine. The defense will try to say that he was not addicted to drugs in that moment, as he had just prior completed a rehabilitation program. Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed a special prosecutor to the case, so the federal government appears more removed and there's no appearance of bias. If convicted on all charges, he faces a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison and $750,000 in fines. He's pleaded not guilty to all charges. This comes about a year after his plea deal on the case fell through. In the courtroom, he was supported by his stepmom, First Lady Jill Biden, and his stepsister, Ashley Biden, and his wife. In a separate trial in Los Angeles, Hunter Biden also faces felony tax evasion charges, allegedly defrauding the government $1.4 million, and this case will be heard later this year. He has pled not guilty. Hunter Biden is the first child of a sitting president to face trial, and the publicity of this trial could have an impact on President Biden's re-election bid. Reporting from Wilmington, Delaware, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
President Biden issuing a rare public statement of support for his son Hunter that says he's also set to announce a sweeping executive action to crack down on illegal immigration. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
And President Biden is showing support for his son Hunter Biden as jury selection began on Monday for Hunter's federal trial on gun charges. In a Monday statement, Biden said, "I'm the president, but I'm also a dad. A lot of families have loved ones who have overcome addiction and know what we mean." While adding he has immense love for and confidence in his son Hunter, Biden added that he wouldn't comment on pending federal cases. This past Sunday, Biden and Hunter were just on a bike ride together. And on Tuesday, President Biden is set to sign an executive order allowing immigration officials to quickly deport illegal immigrants, restricting their ability to claim asylum here. The White House, while not yet confirming the move on Monday, said the administration was exploring a series of policy options to, quote, address our broken immigration system. The move comes as polling continues to show a majority of voters put border as one of their top concerns and remain dissatisfied with Biden's handling of it. Former President Trump's campaign responded on Monday by posting this interview clip from this weekend.
And Biden, by the way, he doesn't need any legislation. He could say the word, close the border. That's what I did. I said, close the border. And it was so bad that it took a little while. I fixed the border originally.
On Monday night, Biden is fundraising in Connecticut before heading off to France later on Tuesday for the D-Day anniversary and a state visit. That says Trump, now officially out of court, is also scheduling several fundraisers in this week and a rally this Sunday in Las Vegas. And Trump's campaign announced on Monday that it raised over $140 million in May amid the New York trial. The campaign says 25% of May's donors were brand new, making this month the best month so far this year. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
2 New York City police officers are in stable condition after they were shot in Queens by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela, according to authorities. The officers were investigating crime involving motorized scooters. NTD's Fiona G has more.
I'm right here in East Elmhurst, just south of LaGuardia Airport, where early this morning, 2 New York City police officers were shot at the intersection right behind me. They had been chasing a suspect who had been driving a moped in the wrong direction on the road. Now, just then, Democratic District Leader Hiram Montserrat held a press conference in reaction to the event.
We have had increased crime as a result of these shelters. And so some folks might be fearful about saying it. Some of the migrant shelters have also increased street crime in our community. They've been silent, and I don't understand it. Where are our elected officials? Where are they? Elected officials, please do something. Make this better. You're being paid to represent us. Represent us. Fix this.
Both officers who were shot are now in stable condition and have already left the hospital. And the suspect, who was also shot in the ankle, is also expected to survive. Now, police say the suspect is a 19-year-old illegal immigrant from Venezuela. In fact, he was living right here in the building behind me, which was a hotel that has now been converted into an illegal immigrant shelter. Police also say this individual is a suspect in several other robbery patterns in Queens. Now, District Leader Montserrat is calling on the city to close down these illegal immigrant shelters and to bring safety back to local communities. Fiona G, NTD News.
Mexico has just elected a new president, a Jewish woman. What does it mean for the country at a time of heightened cartel violence? Take a look.
Media outlets and the ruling party declared ruling party candidate Claudia Sheinbaum the winner of Mexico's presidential election after polls closed on Sunday. That puts her on course to be the country's first woman president. The head of the ruling Morena party, Mario Delgado, told supporters in Mexico City that Sheinbaum had won by a, quote, very large margin. One exit poll gave her a landslide 56% of the vote. Mexico's largest ever elections have also been its most violent in modern history, with the killing of some 38 candidates. On Sunday, 2 people were killed at a polling station in Puebla State. The deadly violence has stoked concerns about the threat posed to democracy by warring drug cartels. More people have been killed during the mandate of outgoing leader Andrés Manuel López Obrador than during any other administration in Mexico's modern history. Sheinbaum, who has convincingly led in opinion polls over her main competitor, Xochitl Gálvez, will be tasked with confronting organized crime violence and reviving a sluggish economy. The winner is set to begin a 6-year term on August 1st.
Family members of hostages are demanding that Israel's prime minister accept the latest ceasefire proposal. Meanwhile, Israel's defense minister sheds light on plans for a post-war Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
People in Israel gathered on Sunday and protested right outside of the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they urged him to accept the latest ceasefire deal being pushed by President Biden.
I'm here to support my government in taking this deal, the deal that Netanyahu suggested, our Prime Minister, that will get all our people back home. We are all here in support for the return of all hostages.
And on Monday, Netanyahu said this.
We are working in countless ways to return our hostages. I think about them all the time, of their families, for their suffering, and that's why we went a long way to bring them back. But in the process of this action, we maintained the goals of the war, chief among them the elimination of Hamas.
This latest proposal comes as the IDF reports that 4 more hostages who had been held in the Gaza Strip are dead, and Hamas terrorists are still holding their bodies. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said Israel has agreed to the ceasefire proposal, but Hamas has not yet responded since receiving it on Thursday. Miller also said that Hamas cannot be defeated through military means alone.
This has been the experience of the United States in counterterrorism activities all around the world, that a military means by itself, without some kind of political path for the population, will ultimately prove ineffective. And you can take out terrorists and see those terrorists replaced, and ultimately find yourself in the same strategic position you did at the start of the campaign.
Israel's defense minister on Monday shed some light on what Gaza may look like after the war.
In parallel to this important military operation, the security establishment, under my instructions, is preparing the governing alternative to Hamas. While we will isolate areas, remove Hamas operatives from these areas, and introduce other forces that will enable an alternative government that will also threaten Hamas.
Meanwhile, the IDF helped establish a new maternity complex at a field hospital in the central Gaza Strip, and it's now officially open. The IDF also said 2 additional generators have helped the hospital expand its capacity, and it can now accommodate approximately 200 patients at once. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Former President Trump just joined TikTok, instantly gathering over 4 million followers. That's 12 times more than President Biden has. Here's the story.
The president is now on TikTok. It's my honor.
Former President Trump's first TikTok video shows him at a UFC match with UFC President Dana White. The new account launched over the weekend, attracting over 4 million followers, 12 times more than President Biden's 348,000. Biden's account launched in early February. This comes as Washington is trying to ban the app.
TikTok's really his only option. Getting very close to the presidential election, we know that he needs to be on social media, needs to have a social media presence.
Social media professor Andrew Selepak says Trump isn't going to other platforms because they banned him. He says Trump doesn't want X because he has Truth Social. But Truth Social's following is small. Selepak says what's left is the media.
If the media is completely in control of the narrative when it comes to him, he can't reach directly out to his voters, to his followers, to his audience, because they're not going to Truth Social. So he has to go where over 100 million Americans are, and that's on TikTok.
TikTok is popular among Gen Z, the oldest of whom are approaching age 30.
They're out of college, they're paying taxes, they're looking at cost of renting, cost of groceries, cost of home ownership. They're looking at the continual changes post-pandemic in the workforce, and they're probably a lot of them are really scared.
Media expert Dustin Siggins says Gen Z is generally liberal and may not like Trump, but he says if they think Trump is competent, many may vote for him. This comes after Americans donated $200 million to Trump's campaign since his conviction in New York. Eric Trump told Fox News that small donations comprise $70 million of that amount.
The Georgia Court of Appeals has set a tentative date to hear former President Trump's appeal of the Fani Willis disqualification ruling. The fall date makes it almost certain that the Georgia RICO trial won't begin before the November election. According to a docket notice, arguments are set for October 4th. Trump and co-defendants are appealing the ruling that stopped short of disqualifying District Attorney Fani Willis after she admitted to having a romantic relationship with her top prosecutor, Nathan Wade. Lower court Judge Scott McAfee said the defendants didn't prove that Willis had a conflict of interest or that she had gained a financial benefit, but he did find that there was an appearance of impropriety, which resulted in Wade's resignation. Trump has pleaded not guilty to all charges of alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. Earlier, we spoke with David Carlucci, Democratic strategist and former New York State Senator, to get his reactions to Trump's conviction in the New York criminal trial, how it will impact both Trump's campaign and President Biden's. David Carlucci, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Now, Congressman Dean Phillips, Democrat who ran against President Biden earlier this year, is now calling on New York Governor Kathy Hochul to pardon Trump for the, quote, good of the country. Now, in a follow-up post, he also said, quote, making him a martyr over a payment to a porn star is stupid. Election charges are entirely different. Now, what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, well, I see what the congressman is saying, and really it's a political move because we know this conviction has helped Donald Trump galvanize record amounts of fundraising that we've heard of. But the issue here is that the law is the law. And the horrible thing about it is the way that Donald Trump is acting, that he's claiming that the whole system is rigged, claiming that Joe Biden had something to do with this, even though we know that's completely false. But every step of the way, Donald Trump is talking about throwing out our whole judicial system because he doesn't like the verdict here. Well, I don't think that makes sense. I think if it was for political expediency, Donald Trump would have not been held to these laws against him. Because it's shown to give him nothing but a rapid rise. The day he was indicted and now the day that he was convicted, it's helped him with his political base. So I think this is just a political ploy by Dean Phillips. And the governor has said that she thinks that the trial was just. And I don't think that she would have any room on her plate to issue a pardon of this matter.
And David, as you mentioned on the fundraising part, Trump's campaign did raise over $50 million last week. Now, the Biden campaign still does have more cash on hand as of the end of April, but that gap does appear to be closing. Should Democrats be worried about this post-verdict fundraising that we saw?
Well, yeah, I think as we've seen, the polls show this is a neck-and-neck race. So every little advantage is something that you've got to be concerned about. But these numbers have not been verified. This is just coming from the Trump camp, so we don't know if it's the actual real numbers. But yes, we believe that he's raising a lot of money from it. The thing that is very interesting here is that we know there's very few people that have not made their mind up about this election. But those people that haven't, those are the ones that really matter here. And it's my belief that that $50 million is coming from the base of support that already supports Donald Trump. If anything, this conviction by a jury of his peers must enter people's brains to say, you know, what's going on here? And is this someone that I want to have as my president? So we know that a lot of people are just not engaged at this point in terms of what's going on in the campaign. But I think they tuned in a little bit when they heard about this conviction. And I think for those independents, especially the way that Donald Trump is talking after this conviction, must be very troubling to them.
On that note, when it comes to reaching these moderates or independents, in your view, should the Biden campaign go hard on that Trump is a convicted felon angle? Is that a winning strategy for November?
Well, I don't know if it's a winning strategy. I think it's something that you have to remind voters of, that Donald Trump has had a has a pattern of this, of just breaking the rules, of frauding the system, and now he has an actual conviction. So I think it's something, yes, to remind voters of, but I think Biden has to be clear about not just what he's done, but what he's going to do. And you see that absent from the campaign trail. Yes, Joe Biden's talking about a lot of his accomplishments, and Donald Trump is only blaming everyone around him, but not talking about what they're going to do in the future. So I think Joe Biden has to zero in on what is he going to do for the average American and why they should vote for him, because we know Donald Trump's playbook, which is just to blame and point fingers up until Election Day and say, hey, I and I alone can fix your problems. That's the Donald Trump strategy. So we know it's working for him to an extent, but I don't think it's enough to put him over the top. I think you've got to be more specific in terms of what you're actually going to do once you occupy the White House.
David Carlucci, thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
How do Americans react to the ongoing indictments against public officials and their families? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall to hear from voters.
I felt like he was guilty from day one.
You have the gun, you have the signed document. I mean, it shouldn't even go to trial.
One of the reasons why they're going after him like they are is because his father is the president. And I think that he should be given a chance like any normal, regular American.
If somebody is guilty of something, regardless of political party, there needs to be consequences to it.
If anyone else did that, they'd throw the book at them. They probably won't do anything to Hunter.
So how do you think his current litigations are compared to former President Trump's situation in New York?
Oh, well, we're Trump supporters, so I don't think Trump's were fair at all. But I still think that Hunter Biden is getting the shaft.
In the Trump case, they had to lift statute of limitations to try him. They didn't announce the actual charge until the reading to the jury.
Why don't they prosecute him to the fullest extent like they're supposedly prosecuting Trump?
I don't have a lot of respect for our judicial system right now because of the constant corruption.
So do you think this case is going to hurt President Biden in the election?
I hope it cripples him.
I don't think it has any bearing, actually.
I'm not really in favor of Biden regardless, so it doesn't really change my opinion.
He's not even running the country. Other people are.
Joining me now to discuss former President Trump's verdict is Bart Marcois, former presidential campaign policy advisor, former Energy Department official for international affairs, and former U.S. diplomat. Bart, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, to begin, following the guilty verdict, former President Trump's campaign said it raised over $50 million within 24 hours. And reports say Trump and the RNC combined raised over $141 million in May. What do you make of this latest cash influx?
Oh, and it's even greater than that. As of today, it's over $200 million, Tiffany. And the other thing is, most of that money is coming in $20 to $50 donations. It tells you that there are tens of millions of people in America who are looking at this verdict and they're saying, oh my gosh, if they could do it to him, what would they do to me?
And how do you think the verdict will impact independent and moderate voters who maybe haven't made up their minds about this election yet? Do you think they'll be more or less likely to support Trump after all of this?
I've spoken with many independent voters in the last couple of days, and most of them were pretty hardcore against Donald Trump until this trial started. The other trials didn't really catch their attention the way this one did. But this one caught their attention and they said, what is he actually accused of? What is it that they're trying him for? I don't understand how they can do this. And they are saying, you know what? I still don't like the man, but I'm voting for him because there's something rotten about all of this. Over and over, that's what I'm hearing from independents. I still don't like him, but I'm voting for him because this is just wrong.
And looking at polls, a Reuters Ipsos poll shows that Trump and Biden are neck and neck. Now, if the election were held today, that same poll found that among independent registered voters, 25% said Trump's conviction made them less likely to support him compared to 18% who said they were more likely and 56% who said the conviction would have no impact on their decision. Now, how do you see this changing the Trump and Biden campaign strategies leading up to November?
Well, I'm not sure what Trump is going to do. I saw a Biden spokesman come out today and say, we are going to put an end forever to the threat of a Trump presidency, kind of giving away the game, what it's really all about. What I hope to see Trump do is go back to his same campaign speech. Were you better off during the 4 years when I was president, or have you been better off during the 3 years that Joe Biden has been in the White House? And if he does that and continues to simply talk about his plans for the future and what he will do and what he did before, I think that point by point, piece by piece, he chips off every single truly uncommitted voter, truly independent voter. People are looking at the trial and they're saying, what is happening to the American justice system? It suddenly appears that no longer is the standard beyond a reasonable doubt or a preponderance of the evidence, but now the standard for guilt or innocence is, what party are you a member of?
Now, switching gears a bit, the jury was seated today in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. Now, do you see that trial impacting President Biden's campaign?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it will. I don't think anything bad will happen to Hunter Biden. He's being tried in Delaware in the most friendly possible environment he can be in, by a very friendly prosecutor, in front of friendly judges, and before a friendly jury. Even though he's, obviously manifestly guilty of the crimes of which he's accused, I'm sure that he'll get off with probation and a slap on the wrist. The only people who generally go to prison for lying on a federal gun form are people who already have felony convictions against them for other things. He doesn't. And he's the son of the president, and it's in Delaware, it's in his home state. It's not going to have much impact.
And Bart, looking at the bigger picture here, the international community is watching the U.S. elections closely. How do you think these recent trials affect America's image on the world stage?
Oh, it's shocking what it's doing to us. The Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Iranians are just congratulating themselves, patting themselves on the back for how lucky they are to have something like this going on and to have their greatest foe be attacked this way and hobbled this way. The people in Western Europe and Eastern and Central Europe who are NATO and EU members, the people in Asia and throughout the world who depend on the United States for their protection are very concerned. They're very worried. They see the Democrats saying things, accusing people of being fascists, but they see the Democrats doing the things that the fascists did. They're doing the things that Hitler did. They're doing the things that the communists did, that Mao Zedong did in China, that Stalin did in Russia, show trials of their political enemies. And it frightens our friends and it gives aid and comfort to our enemies.
Quite concerning indeed. Bart Marcois, former presidential campaign policy advisor and former U.S. diplomat. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, who is on trial for federal bribery charges, has filed to run as an independent candidate for re-election. And here's what else is coming up on Capitol Hill. Attorney General Merrick Garland will appear for a House hearing tomorrow. His appearance comes on the heels of Trump's conviction and as Republicans are weighing whether to hold Garland in contempt. The Republican-led House Judiciary Committee accuses the DOJ of being politicized and weaponized under AG Garland. Key topics include Biden's classified documents and the lack of action against Michael Cohen, Trump's convicting witness. Chairman Jim Jordan also seeks testimony from Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg next week. The FBI Director Christopher Wray will also be on Capitol Hill to defend the Bureau's 2025 budget request. Another high-profile hearing we'll be watching tomorrow will commemorate the 35th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Lawmakers on the Bipartisan China Commission will review the legacy of people who demand freedom from the Chinese Communist Party. After 6 people were charged with organized retail theft at a CVS store last week, San Francisco officials are cracking down on shoplifting and the selling of stolen items on the streets. Police officers would have the ability to cite street vendors who sell items without permits. NTD's David Lamb reports.
San Francisco officials want to protect its legitimate street vendors from those selling stolen items, also known as fencing.
Fencing of stolen goods in our streets is a major issue in parts of San Francisco, particularly in the Mission, in the Tenderloin, South of Market, and other neighborhoods.
Officials are proposing Senate Bill 925, where the city would be able to ask vendors to show a legitimate permit and proof of purchase for certain items that are frequently stolen.
We're community and we don't get down with fencing, but we will always support our culture, our history of street vending, and our community and our entrepreneurs.
The list of items that will need permits will be decided by the city. If cited by the 3rd time for selling without permits, people can be charged with a misdemeanor and up to 6 months in jail. This does not apply to food vendors.
There is a huge difference between those who are vending in terms of making a living, selling their goods that they make, that they've produced, and that they're out there supporting the community, and the people who are fencing, who are stealing items from our brick and mortar places that are creating a lot of problems.
Weiner says city employees have been assaulted for confronting illegal fencing.
We have recovered thousands of items of stolen goods from these illegal fencing markets over just this year alone. And I'm optimistic that this momentum will continue because of this legislation.
Days before this announcement, 6 people were charged with organized retail theft from CVS, according to the district attorney. The suspects were ages 19 to 25, and law enforcement recovered makeup, diapers, hygiene products, batteries, and other items. One supervisor says she's planning to introduce a law to support SB 925 on Tuesday. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Atlanta, Georgia remains under a state of emergency today as utility crews work to fix water main breaks. Residents had to close tourist attractions and postpone events due to the ruptures.
So right now, Atlantans, most Atlantans have water. It's just we want to make sure that they boil it out of a precautionary measure. And this has been in place over the last day and a half to 2 days that we've been under a boil water advisory. We're trying to resolve the situation. Nobody is happy when you can see water gushing out of the street.
Summer school programs are also canceled today. A boil advisory remains in effect, and non-essential city employees were told to work remotely. Atlanta's mayor says the city's water woes began last Friday when a pair of century-old water pipes broke. A famous Hawaiian volcano known for its frequent eruptions has begun spilling lava again. The U.S. Geological Survey reports the Kailua volcano began erupting early this morning. It issued a red alert, which signifies hazardous activity is imminent or already underway. A USGS spokesperson told ABC News that previous eruptions have spouted up to 65 feet. In addition to lava, volcanic ash can pose a danger to aircraft in the area. But the biggest threat from the eruption is the high level of volcanic gas, which can be hazardous to humans and animals and also damage agricultural crops. The last time there was a similar eruption was in 1974. Severe heat will scorch parts of the U.S. from Arizona to California this week, with temperatures soaring into the triple digits. NTD's Christina Corona brings us the latest weather update.
According to the National Weather Service, excessive heat warnings are in effect for more than 10 million people in California, Nevada, and Arizona this week. Starting Tuesday, an excessive heat warning is issued for California's Valley region, with temperatures possibly reaching 108 degrees, from Redding to Bakersfield. On Wednesday, the warning extends from Las Vegas to Lake Havasu City, Arizona. By Thursday or Friday, temperatures could soar to 112 degrees in Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Palm Springs, California. If Las Vegas exceeds 110 degrees on Thursday, it will be the earliest in June the city has reached such temperatures. Phoenix might break its daily record of 111 degrees set in 2016 on the same day. Reno, Nevada, and Fresno, California will also approach daily records on Thursday. This extreme heat poses a significant health risk, potentially causing heat cramps and heat exhaustion, which can lead to heat stroke without intervention. Further north, temperatures in Salt Lake City and Boise, Idaho could reach the mid-90s. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in tennis, where Novak Djokovic came back to win another 5-set marathon match at the French Open. How close was he to losing?
Well, pretty close. Now, he didn't face any match points, but he was down a set and a break in the fourth, and he still came back to win. It was pretty amazing. Now, this is against 23rd seeded Francisco Cerundolo. Now, Cerundolo in the second and third sets led by a break, led 4-2 in the fourth. All of a sudden, Djokovic won 7 of the next 8 games to take control of the fifth set, and he would go on to win. Now, as you mentioned, this was Djokovic's second straight 5-set match, both timed about 4.5 hours. That's very long, and to do 2 in a row at age 37 is probably even tougher. I mean, he's already one of the oldest players on tour. Now, in addition to that, he had to take a medical timeout, have someone work on his knee during the match, on his knee and his hamstring. So he is into the quarterfinals, where he'll play 7th-seeded Casper Ruud coming up next.
With the win today, Djokovic passed Roger Federer for most career Grand Slam matches won with 370. Is it safe to say he's emerged from tennis's big three as the best one?
For sure. I think this is yet another validation of that. You know, he already has probably the most 2 important milestones. Most Grand Slam championships won and most weeks ranked number 1. And he's actually still ranked number 1. I mean, he has like a 2-year lead now over the second place, which is Roger Federer. The only major milestone left is probably most ATP Tour titles. He's got 98, Federer's second with 103. Jimmy Connors number 1 at 109. But at his current pace, it seems like he's got a very good shot at that one too. It should be noted though that injuries eventually forced Federer to retire at 39. Nadal looks like he's going to have to retire very soon because of injuries. He's 38 right now. Djokovic just turned 37. He's been very fortunate with injuries though. But even if he had to retire today, his resume shows he's the greatest player ever. I hope he doesn't retire anytime soon though, because I'd like to see how long he can go at this current pace though.
Moving to NFL news, Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson reportedly signed a $140 million contract to stay in Minnesota. Where does this contract rank him?
Very high. He's now the highest paid non-quarterback anyway in the NFL. This is an average of this is a 4-year deal, so it's an average of $35 million a year. This is just ahead of Nick Bosa's $34 million for the most ever by a non-quarterback. Now, Jefferson, though, he has definitely been worth it. 3 Pro Bowl appearances in his 4 years, 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons to start his career. Although I am interested to see how well he does without Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball. Cousins signed in Atlanta this offseason. Although he's never been in the MVP discussions, he's been to 4 Pro Bowls himself and is a very good player. So we'll have to see how Jefferson does with a new person throwing him the ball this season.
Shifting gears to the ice, the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers won their conferences over the weekend and will meet in the Stanley Cup Finals. Who's favored to win?
The Panthers, not by much though, but they are the slight betting favorites pretty much across the board from everything I saw. Now they just beat the New York Rangers, who had the best record in the league. Now this is their 2nd straight Stanley Cup Finals appearance, 3rd overall. They've yet to win it though. Edmonton, meanwhile, they upset Dallas to get here, but they're not really a surprise team. I mean, everyone knows about their offense because you've got Connor McDavid, who's the 3-time MVP, leading the way. Now, they haven't been to the finals since 2006, haven't won it all since 1990. But if they did, they would be the first Canadian team actually to win it in more than 3 decades. Now, Game 1 will be in Florida, and this will start on this Saturday night.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For around-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.